After my husband died 16 years ago, I learned how loud silence could be. Not the peaceful kind. No, the kind that hums in your ears and creeps into your bones at night. At first, I filled it with noise. The TV ran all day. The radio murmured in the kitchen. But grief is patient. It waits behind every closed door. And when the noise dies down, it's still there. Eventually, I stopped running from it. I made peace with the quiet. I learned to live in my own rhythm. 6:30 a.m. walks before the neighbors stirred. Coffee with exactly 1 spoon of sugar and 1 splash of milk. Feeding the birds and talking to them like they could understand. Sunday crosswords, worn pencils, warm slippers. I wasn't unhappy. I had a house that I paid off with 3 decades of teaching. I had memories in every corner. His handwriting in old birthday cards, the squeaky stair I never fixed, the tree we planted when Daniel was born. This house wasn't just mine. It was me. My son Daniel visited occasionally. Not often, but enough to remind me that I wasn't forgotten, at least not entirely. His wife Rachel always came too. Her smile was polished like her shoes, pleasant but practiced, like she had somewhere better to be. And lately, their tone had shifted. "You know, Mum, a condo might be easier. This place must feel so empty without Dad. Wouldn't it be nice to live closer to the city?" They weren't questions. They were rehearsed lines. I brushed it off. I smiled and served tea. I played the part they wanted, the sweet, gentle old lady. Harmless, naive. What they didn't know is that I hear everything, even the things they whisper when they think I'm out of earshot. Last week, while clearing dishes, I heard Rachel say, "She won't even remember signing it." And Daniel, he said nothing, just sipped his coffee and stared at the table. That was the first time I felt it, not fear, but fire. Still, nothing prepared me for that morning. Tuesday, 9:17 a.m. I was stirring honey into my tea when I heard the car door slam. Too early for a social visit, too confident a knock. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. Rachel was dressed in all black, not a hair out of place, holding a sleek folder under her arm. Daniel stood behind her, shoulders hunched. "Hi, Mum," she said, as if we were about to share good news. "We have something exciting to talk about." I knew that tone, that corporate, upbeat lie. Still, I stepped aside. They sat down at the kitchen table like it belonged to them. Rachel opened the folder and slid it toward me. I saw it instantly. Photos of my home, appraisal numbers, contracts. My home had been listed for sale already. "We've found a lovely couple," Rachel beamed. "They love the garden. And the fireplace? Instant charm." My hand trembled. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to any of this. "I never said I was selling," I whispered. Daniel still wouldn't look up. Rachel leaned in, voice dripping with sugar. "Well, we just assumed. It's for the best, really. You'll be safer in a smaller place." And then she leaned in closer. So close I could smell her lavender perfume, sweet and artificial, like everything else about her. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "It'll be easier for everyone if you don't make this difficult." That's when something in me snapped. Not loudly, not visibly, but inside. Something ancient stirred. Something steel-hard. Something no one had seen in a long time. I didn't answer her. I just smiled, ever so slightly. Because in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. They thought I was done. I didn't speak. Not that day. Not in that moment. I just nodded slowly as Rachel kept talking, filling the air with fake empathy and neatly prepared logistics. "You'll love the place we found," she said, as if she were doing me a favor. A little apartment just outside the city. No stairs, near a pharmacy. Very manageable. Manageable. A word people use when they think you're shrinking, when they assume your world should get smaller just because your skin has started to fold. Daniel finally spoke. Quiet. Hesitant. "We're just trying to help, Mum." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was pathetic. Help? Was it help when I sold my jewelry so he could finish college? Was it help when I kept their lights on after they both lost their jobs during the pandemic? Was it help when I babysat for weeks so they could take their much-needed vacation to Aruba? They weren't trying to help. They were trying to erase me. Politely, of course, with folders and listings and tight-lipped smiles. And for a moment, I wondered if they'd ever known me at all. They forgot I grew up with 4 brothers and no patience. They forgot I worked 2 jobs while carrying Daniel on my hip. They forgot I once fought off a man who tried to break into our home while my husband was still at work. They forgot that softness doesn't mean weakness, and silence isn't surrender. I watched Rachel tuck the folder back into her leather handbag like the matter was settled. She stood up, smoothed her blazer, and offered that rehearsed corporate grin. "We'll be back in a few days to start packing," she said. Then she patted my shoulder, like I was a child or a dying pet. I walked them to the door. They didn't even say goodbye. When the door clicked shut, I stood there for a long time. Tea gone cold, pulse steady, but my breath sharp, focused. I went to the hallway closet, reached high above the top shelf, and pulled down an old address book. The pages were yellowing, names fading. But I knew exactly which one I was looking for. Clara Myers. We used to teach together. 5th grade. She taught math, I taught literature. We were an unstoppable team once. But after she left to go to law school, we lost touch. Still, I kept her number. I always did. Something told me one day I might need her. That day had come. I called. 3 rings. Then her voice. "Hello?" I didn't even say hello. I said, "Clara, it's Margaret. I think my family is trying to steal my house." Clara was silent for a second. Then she said 4 words I'll never forget. "I hope they're ready." She told me to meet her at her office the next morning. "No delays," she said. "Bring everything. Property papers, bank statements, letters, anything they've sent you." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't. I was wide awake. Not as a grieving widow, not as a forgotten mother, but as a woman who had just been reminded of her power. And as I stared out the window at the moonlit garden below, I whispered to no one in particular, "Let them come back. I'll be waiting." I arrived at Clara's office 15 minutes early, but she was already waiting. Same sharp eyes, same no-nonsense voice. The kind of woman who could silence an entire school hallway with just a look. Some people mellow with age. "Clara," she sharpened. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of place where no lie survives. I sat down and opened the worn manila folder I had carried tucked under my coat like a weapon. "You brought the deed?" she asked. I nodded. "And the power of attorney paperwork?" I handed it over. She flipped through the pages, pausing when she saw Daniel's name. "Did you ever authorize him to act on your behalf in financial matters?" "Never," I said. She didn't even blink. "Then he's in trouble." They thought I didn't know what I had. They thought I'd lost track. Of documents, of dates, of rights. But what they didn't realize is that I never throw anything away. Not cards, not receipts, not evidence. I keep everything, tucked in shoeboxes, behind cookbooks, under old sweaters no one ever touches. The house is full of ghosts, but also records, because I may have stopped talking, but I've never stopped watching. Clara ran her fingers along one of the forged signatures. "It's not even close," she said. And she was right. The loops were wrong. The date was off. They didn't even bother to spell out my middle name. They were confident, she added, almost amused. And I could tell. She smelled blood. I pulled out an envelope I had nearly forgotten I still had, postmarked 6 months ago. Inside was a typed letter from Rachel, politely thanking me for allowing them to begin the process of relocation. No signature, no return address, just arrogance, thinly veiled in passive-aggressive pleasantries. I had kept it. And now? It was proof. Clara smiled. Oh, Margaret? They had no idea who they were messing with. We spent the next 2 hours building the foundation of something they never expected. A case, fraud, coercion, attempted unlawful transfer of property. And yes, elder abuse. A word I never imagined would be written next to my name. But Clara said, "If they treat you like a target, we'll show the court they picked the wrong one." I left her office that day feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Steady, like the earth beneath me had stopped shaking. That night, I pulled down every old box in the attic, sorted through every letter, every mortgage slip, every bill in Daniel's name I had quietly paid. It wasn't just paper. It was ammunition. And as I sat there in the dim light with my legs tucked under me and dust in my hair, I felt something rise in my chest. Not grief, not bitterness, strategy. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore, not just a widow, not just an old woman living in a house they wanted to steal. I was something far more dangerous now. I was prepared. And while they were sipping wine and making plans in a condo downtown, I was sealing folders, labeling documents, laying the bricks of something they wouldn't see until it was far, far too late. Let them underestimate me. Let them walk into the trap with smiles on their faces. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. 3 days after Clara and I laid the foundation of our case, I heard the knock again. Same door. Same sound. But this time, I didn't flinch. I had just finished folding laundry, towels warm from the dryer. I placed the last one in the hallway cupboard before walking to the door with steady feet. Rachel stood there, hair pulled tight, black leather folder clutched like a weapon. Daniel lingered behind her, trying and failing to look confident. "Hi, Mum," Rachel said too brightly. "We're just checking in. Wanted to see how you're doing and go over some final details." Final details. They still thought this was a done deal. I let them in. Not because I had to, because I wanted them to see what confidence actually looked like. Rachel walked straight to the kitchen like she owned the place. She sat down, flipping through papers, muttering dates and moving plans under Har Adam. Daniel remained standing, eyes scanning the room. He noticed things were missing: the pictures on the mantel, the files on the desk, the folders from the drawer. They were with Clara now. "Have you packed anything yet?" Rachel asked, glancing up. She crossed her legs and smiled like she was closing a deal. I poured myself tea, slowly, quietly. No answer. Then Daniel cleared his throat. "You've got less than a week, Mom. We really need to stick to the schedule. The buyers are ready." I turned to face them both. "I won't be leaving," I said. Calm. Final. Rachel laughed once, short and sharp. "What?" I said, "I'm not leaving." She blinked, then narrowed her eyes. "That's not up to you." "Oh, but it is." I stepped closer and placed a small, folded envelope on the table between us. Clara's letterhead printed clean and bold across the top. "From my lawyer," I said. Rachel didn't move. Daniel picked it up with 2 fingers and read the first lines. "Cease and desist. Power of attorney revoked. Criminal forgery under investigation." His hands began to shake. "Mom, what is this?" "It's reality," I said. "Something you've both had a hard time facing." Rachel stood now. Her smile vanished. "You're being manipulated. You don't even understand." I leaned in just enough to meet her eyes. "You forged my signature, Rachel. And you involved my son in the crime. You assumed I wouldn't know, wouldn't fight, wouldn't matter." She looked down. I saw it. The flicker of doubt. Good. Daniel looked like a boy again. Not a man. Not a father. Not a husband. Just my son. Lost and scared. The same boy who once cried in my arms when he didn't make the baseball team. But I didn't soften. I couldn't. They left soon after. No hugs. No, "we'll talk later." Just silence, swallowed by the sound of the front door closing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar rising in my chest. Power. Not anger. Not vengeance. Just the quiet, deep certainty that I had taken back control. Let them talk to their realtor. Let them panic. Because this was no longer their story. It was mine. 2 days after they walked out of my house, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was alert, watching, waiting, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. I sat in my reading chair, a cup of tea untouched beside me, as the late afternoon sun drew long golden lines across the floor. The letter from Clara lay on the table, still sealed for now. Its presence alone enough to shift gravity in the room. They hadn't called. Not a word. Not a text. Not even one of those passive-aggressive emails Rachel liked to send, which told me everything. They were scrambling, behind closed doors, behind screens, behind that polite, perfect facade. I knew them well enough to know that silence wasn't peace. It was panic. And I was ready. Because for every day they thought I was weak, I was watching. For every signature they forged, I was collecting. For every insult disguised as concern, I was building a case. And now the cracks were showing. That afternoon I got a knock on the door. I thought it would be them. It wasn't. It was Mary, my neighbor from across the street. She stood on my porch holding a pie and wearing a frown that didn't belong on her face. "Can I come in?" I nodded. She sat down, placed the pie on the counter and looked at me. "I just wanted you to know." She paused, searching for the right words. Rachel came by. "Yesterday." My heart didn't skip a beat. It didn't have to. I already knew. "She said you were moving, that you were confused, that the house was too much for you." Hook. There it was. The lie they had told others was spreading. A smear campaign, carefully designed. Rachel wasn't just trying to take my house. She was trying to rewrite me. Turn me into some frail, forgetful, stubborn old woman who didn't know what was good for her. Mary shook her head. But I didn't believe her. I told her, "That woman taught my kids. She's got more strength in her little finger than you have in your whole damn body." I smiled. Not because I needed the compliment, but because Rachel had underestimated something far more powerful than legal documents. Community. People talk. And when they do, the truth bubbles up. Later that evening, I received another unexpected visitor. Tom, retired contractor. Fixed my fence last summer. He stood on my doorstep, holding a printed email. "This was forwarded to me by accident," he said. Your daughter-in-law asked if I'd give an estimate on gutting the interior before the deal closed. He handed it to me like it was poison, because it was. They had already planned the renovation, already chosen paint colours, flooring, fixtures. They were renovating my life before they even took it. Hook. That was the moment I stopped feeling surprised, because this wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated, premeditated, businesslike. And the truth? It was working. For now. At church, people started giving me soft looks, the kind reserved for someone who's losing it. A neighbour asked if I needed help putting the bins out. They were planting doubt, and some of it was starting to grow. But what they didn't know, I had planted something too, and unlike their lies, mine had roots. That night, I called Clara. "They're trying to ruin my name," I said. Her voice was calm. "Then we'll build you a bigger one." She was already a step ahead, preparing statements, drafting affidavits, contacting former colleagues, neighbours, friends, anyone who'd ever seen me organise a fundraiser, run a parent-teacher night, or mow my own damn lawn in July. "You won't have to prove who you are," she said. "They'll have to prove who they aren't." Hook. That was the shift. This wasn't a defence anymore. It was a counterattack. And as I stood in my hallway that night, listening to the wind brush against the windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Conviction. Let them whisper. Let them lie. Let them paint me as weak. Because when the mask finally slips, and it always does, they'll be exposed. And this time, everyone will be watching. They always say the truth has a way of surfacing, but what they forget is that sometimes it erupts. It starts small, a tremor, a flicker, a raised eyebrow from someone who used to believe them. But soon, the cracks spread. And when they do, the walls fall faster than anyone is prepared for. Rachel built her story like a palace, polished, controlled. But she forgot one thing. You don't build palaces on stolen ground. It started on a Wednesday. Clara called me mid-morning. I could hear the click of her keyboard as she spoke. "Your daughter-in-law is under review." I froze. "She submitted the forged documents to a public notary," Clara continued, "and we've obtained the original file. The handwriting analysis alone is enough to press criminal charges." I didn't speak right away. I just stared at the wall, not shocked, not scared, just ready. "She's going to deny it," I finally said. "She already has," Clara replied. "But her story doesn't match Daniel's, and that's how lies fall apart. Not with drama, with contradiction." Hook. That was the first fracture. Rachel had always controlled the narrative. She chose the words, the timing, the victims. But now, she couldn't control Daniel. And Daniel? He was starting to crack. That same evening, I heard from someone I hadn't expected. Linda, an old family friend who used to live next door. She messaged me with a simple line. "I ran into your son today." He looked ashamed. Ashamed. A word I hadn't associated with Daniel in years. Maybe he remembered. Maybe he could still feel the woman who stayed up all night during his fever at age 9. Maybe he still saw the mother who skipped meals so he could have new shoes for graduation. Maybe, just maybe, that version of him wasn't dead. But it didn't matter now, because even if guilt stirred in him, Rachel was unraveling faster than he could keep up. The next day, Clara and I sent a formal notice to the real estate agency. We presented evidence of attempted fraud, misuse of a forged POA, power of attorney, and misrepresentation of ownership. The listing? Removed within 6 hours. Hook, first victory. Symbolish, ma tastbar. Rachel had planned to walk buyers through my home by the weekend. Instead, they walked her out of the office with her license flagged. Word began to spread. Fast. It always does when the villain starts to fall. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Mrs. Chen from the school board. George, who used to deliver our newspapers. Even the pastor's wife. All of them saying the same thing in their own words. We heard what she tried to do. We had no idea. You don't deserve this. Tell us how we can help. Hook. The tide was turning, and I wasn't even pushing. The cracks in Rachel's story weren't just legal now. They were social. And in communities like ours, that's sometimes the bigger blow. She was losing her image. And with it, her control. But what struck me most was Daniel. That Friday, I saw him sitting in his car across the street. For nearly 45 minutes, engine off, hands in his lap, not moving. He didn't knock, didn't call, just sat there. And I watched him through the curtains like I used to when he missed curfew as a teenager. He looked older than I remembered, tired, smaller, and for a moment, just a breath. My heart almost softened. But then I remembered the folder, the signature, the silence, and I turned away. They thought they were pulling a thread from a sweater, but they didn't realize they were unraveling themselves. And I was no longer defending. I was documenting, waiting, tightening the net. Because this wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about respect, about memory, about identity. Let them stumble. Let them scramble to clean their mess. Because while they were gaslighting a grandmother, she was building a reckoning. It was just past 6 p.m. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across my living room rug. I was shelling peas, the way I always did when I needed to keep my hands busy and my mind clear. The knock was soft. Once. Then again. I knew who it was before I even stood up. Some things a mother just feels. I opened the door slowly, and there he was, Daniel, standing on the porch with his shoulders drawn up and his hands in his jacket pockets like a schoolboy caught cheating. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Hi, Mom." I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He walked in like a stranger, like he didn't quite remember the creak in the hallway floor or where to put his shoes. He sat down at the edge of the couch, like the cushions might bite. I stayed standing. Hook. He wasn't here to explain. He was here because the world outside had turned on him. Rachel had been exposed. The documents had gone public. Her license had been suspended. Neighbors stopped waving. The silence had returned, but not for me. Now it was his turn. He cleared his throat. I didn't know she was going that far. Hook. The lie came out smooth, practiced, but his voice cracked halfway through. I didn't call him out, didn't yell. I just tilted my head, waited. He kept talking. She said you agreed, that it was already signed, that you just didn't remember. I finally spoke. And you believed that? He looked up, startled. I hadn't raised my voice, but my words hit like a hammer. You believed that I'd forget giving you my home? That I'd forget the roof I built for you with my own hands? There it was. The wince. The guilt behind the eyes. Hook. Guilt is useless when it comes too late. He said nothing. Just sat there. A grown man shrinking into himself. I didn't know what to do, he said quietly. She said if we didn't sell, we'd be buried in debt. That the buyers were already lined up. That it was just paperwork. That's all I am to her then? I asked. Paperwork? He flinched again. Hook. He expected me to cry, or forgive, or offer him tea like nothing happened. But I stayed where I was. Still. cold, clear. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't always come with fire and shouting. Sometimes it sits in your living room, with the same face you once kissed goodnight, the same voice that once whispered, "I love you, Mommy," after nightmares. But now that voice was empty. He reached into his coat and placed something on the table. It was a photo. Old. Faded. Him at 10 years old, holding a trophy I forgot we even had. I didn't touch it. "I found it in the garage," he said. "I thought, maybe you'd want it." I looked at the photo, then at him. "Do you want me to remember the boy in that picture?" I asked. "Or forget the man in front of me?" Hook. Silence, again. But this time, it was his. Heavy, burning, truthful. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. And for a second, a part of me softened. The mother in me stirred. But the woman who had been dismissed, manipulated, nearly erased, she stayed firm. "I believe you," I said. "But I don't forgive you." He blinked, not in anger, in recognition. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can give someone isn't comfort, it's clarity. "You can go now," I said. He nodded, stood, left without another word. And I didn't cry. Not that night. Not anymore. Because forgiveness is earned. And Daniel? He was only just beginning to understand the cost. She wasn't finished. Women like Rachel don't go down with silence or shame. When power slips through their fingers, they don't open their hands. They clench tighter. And when control fails in private, they move to the public stage. It began online, subtle, but targeted. A carefully worded Facebook post. "It's heartbreaking when the people you try to help turn on you. I've done all I can. Some people just want drama." No names, no specifics. Just enough suggestion to let people connect the dots themselves. And let her appear like the wounded party. Then came the messages. Private ones. To extended family. To old friends. To church acquaintances. They all carried the same story, wrapped in concern. That I was confused. That I wasn't well. That Daniel had tried everything. That she had only been trying to protect me. She made herself the caretaker. And me? The problem. The strategy was clear. She didn't need everyone to believe her. Just enough people to wonder. Doubt can do more damage than any fact when it spreads quietly. The first call came from Carla, my cousin's daughter. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice light but unsure. "Rachel said you've been struggling a bit lately." There it was. Not accusation, but suggestion. Not direct, but dangerous. I responded with calm clarity. No bitterness, no rage. "She's mistaken," I said, "and she knows it." What Rachel didn't anticipate was that I had already moved ahead of her. Clara had sent out a packet 2 days earlier. Clean, concise, undeniable. A notarized account of everything. The forged documents, the power of attorney, the withdrawn listing. It went to the people who mattered most. The family members with influence. The neighbors who'd heard whispers. The pastor's wife. And unlike Rachel's stories, our truth came with evidence. The tide began to turn. Slowly, then all at once. People stopped replying to her messages. One neighbor posted something quiet, but firm. "It's strange how the people who shout the loudest often have the most to hide." Rachel deleted her post within the hour. Then, she tried the local paper, claimed a private family conflict had spiraled due to misunderstandings and misinformation. But the editor she spoke to had once been in my classroom. He still remembered the woman who taught him to write full sentences when no one else had time. The article was never printed. With her social mask cracking, she did the only thing left. She showed up. No warning, no invitation. She stood on my porch wearing a stiff coat and desperation in her eyes. "You've embarrassed this entire family," she hissed. "People are treating you like some kind of hero." I looked at her, calm, clear-eyed. "Maybe I am." Her face darkened. That's when she noticed the security camera above the door, red light blinking, documenting every word. She didn't say another thing, just turned and walked down the steps like they might collapse beneath her. And for the first time since this started, I let the silence feel like peace. Not because the noise had stopped, but because it no longer belonged to her. She had tried to take everything from me, but all she managed to lose was herself. People think stories end with a courtroom decision, or with an apology, or with a slammed door and a line in the sand. But that's not how real life works. Some endings arrive slowly, not with thunder, but with a breath. Not when something is taken away, but when you finally realize what was never theirs to begin with. A month passed. Autumn came early that year. The trees outside shed their leaves faster than I remembered. But inside, I was blooming. For the first time in years, I slept without waking at 3 a.m., wondering if I had left a light on. For the first time in months, I opened the mail without fear that my own name would be used against me. One afternoon, I sat down at my kitchen table, the same one where Rachel once tried to sell me out, and began writing letters. Not to lawyers, not to Daniel, but to people who mattered. My goddaughter in Vermont, who'd stopped calling out of misplaced loyalty. The couple next door who had offered to mow my lawn after hearing things. My old colleague from the school. The one who had quietly asked if I was still okay in that big house. To each of them, I wrote the same thing. I am still here, and I am not done. Because I wasn't. Not done speaking. Not done claiming space. Not done being seen. They tried to frame me as finished, like a chapter they could close. But what they didn't understand is that I was the one holding the pen the whole time. They simply never looked close enough. And that's the problem with people like Rachel. They confuse silence with submission, age with irrelevance, grace with weakness. They see quiet women and think we're safe to ignore, easy to push aside, too polite to fight back. But polite doesn't mean powerless, and quiet doesn't mean blind. I knew who I was, long before they tried to tell me. And now, the world knows it too. Daniel sent a card, weeks later. Just one line. "I'm sorry. For everything." I placed it in a drawer, not to forget, but to remember what sorry really costs when it comes too late. Rachel never spoke to me again. That too was a gift. This house is still mine, not just because the papers say so, but because it breathes my story in every corner. And I've already decided what happens next. It won't be passed to those who tried to take it. It will go to someone who knows what it means to build, not take. To protect, not manipulate. To love, not leverage. There's a girl at the library, bright eyes, raised by her grandmother. She visits me twice a week to help with groceries. We talk. We read. She listens. One day, when I'm gone, I'll leave it to her, because she reminds me of who I used to be. Before the world tried to convince me I was done, I light a candle in the window every night now, not because I'm waiting for someone, but because I've already arrived. I am not done, and I never will be.